The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, and so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS-HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed, and we knew we were getting to the local community, and people were asking questions. So those were the best. I think I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well, and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Hello everyone, welcome to our weekly Hawaiian Volcano Tracker. Today's Thursday, May 29th, 2025, and we're here with our weekly Hawaiian Volcano update on Kīlauea's newest episode, number 23 of its ongoing eruption, now in its past 5 months into it. And we'll discuss all that comes with that. How have you been this past week, Dane? And Lou as well, up there in the corner.
Yeah, doing good. a lot of build up to that last episode, but boy, did it deliver. And we got a bunch of different footage to go through today and recap that whole episode for you. So yeah, been a good week, been busy as always, but had that little treat coming into the week with.
Yeah, a little different. How about you, Lou? How's it for you?
Been good. Same, just busy, and it's 6. It was 6 hours of that eruption, but it's 6 continuous hours of just flow. You just went through one of the shots right there, showing the force of it coming out of the north vent. That was an incredible episode. I feel like I'm saying that every week.
Well, that's a sign of the times, which is that this is one of the glory eras of Kīlauea, really, this high fountaining, 5 months of it now that we're blessed to be witnessing here. So we'll get into it as usual, cover all the signals that are out there and talk some story. We are missing our interpreters tonight, but we will do the best we can to share everything anyways. Anything you guys want to add before we get into it here?
Nope. If anybody's got any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them in a Q&A session at the end.
All right, sounds good. So let's get to our volcano summary here. Well, hey everyone, this is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for May 29th, 2025. Episode 23 of Kīlauea Summit Eruption began and ended this past Sunday, May 25th, lasting only 6 hours between about 4:15 and 10:25 p.m. See some images of that episode coming on screen here, but I'll play back the live stream compilations that we have from the USGS cameras. You see that the fountaining began from the north vent and reached very high peaks of over 350 meters or 1,150 feet, and was joined by the south vent after that as the north vent waned down, which also reached heights of 800 feet or so. That dropped a lot of material towards the southwest with the dominant trade winds this past eruption, but those very high fountains were also accompanied by a massive outpouring of gas that was able to reach up to 29,000 feet above sea level, according to the USGS reports. Here, our webcams are only showing us this low-level fallout of tephra and gas, and a lot of the other stuff is higher up above the camera here. So for that reason, we can actually go to the camera on Mauna Loa, which you can see here, the gas plume rising above the rim of Mauna Loa, which is here at around 14,000 feet in elevation, just under, in fact. So quite high, and in fact was visible from Mauna Kea as well. And that puts this as the highest fountain episode thus far in the 5 months of eruption, exceeding even the 2 that we had earlier, episodes 15 and 16. The USGS has updated their table accordingly, and showing us that we had a longer than usual pause here of 9 days following episode 22, coming to episode 23. So if we look at the fallout from satellite views, we can see here satellite INSAR image showing the low-level fallout to the southwest by this speckled discoloration here. And further, the satellite detecting SO2 shows this wider gas dispersal south of the island and covering the south part of Kīlauea. And it seems likely that as the gas reached those upper atmosphere elevations, it was blown by different winds, and that allowed lighter materials like Pele's hair and reticulite to be dispersed from the southeast part of Kīlauea across Mana'ulu all the way as far as Ocean View in South Hawaii. The eruption fed lava flows once again that crossed the full length of Halemaʻumaʻu crater floor. This is about 1 1/3 miles across, or just over 2 kilometers, as lava was inflating underneath the crust in between the episodes as well. So here we have the most recent map from a few weeks ago showing the location of the vents in the southwest and this distance across the crater floor the flows traveled, all contained within a summit crater in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and posing no threat to people. If we look at the ground signals since the eruption ended, we see the resumption of inflation swelling of the ground as magma is reoccupying the reservoir, suggesting that we are primed for another episode, which the USGS suggests comes in the next 3 to 7 days. The VOG forecast is showing the inter-episode emissions of around 1,200 to 1,500 tons per day, which blow regularly to the southwest and affect communities in these areas under the regular trade wind pattern. Earthquakes have been quiet over the past week, with the largest cluster underneath the summit caldera itself, but still ongoing background activity underneath the south flank in the Deep Pahala feeder zone as well. We can see from our GPS distances across the summit caldera that we are oscillating, extending, and contracting as we erupt each episode and then recover by stretching back out, with an overall trend of spreading the caldera slightly at a slower rate than we have in the previous parts of the year. And in comparison, we look at the southeast rift zone by Pu'o'o, which has been showing this contractional trend with a little more noise in the data here recently, but still showing a much different pattern than you would see if magma is invading the system as occurred last summer. That's it on Kīlauea. Mauna Loa is still very quiet. Here are the earthquakes over the entire last month, showing the summit area with background activity, some adjustments on the flanks. At very low counts, earthquakes per month are still in a less than 100 range here following the eruption in 2022. So volcano is still filling with magma very, very slowly, and ground rising, as is seen in this long-term vertical GPS at Mauna Loa summit, also with some extra noise here in recent weeks. And that's your volcano summary for this week. So we will do things a little bit differently this week. We're going to turn things around. And I'm going to start off by showing a nice clip that Lou compiled from the talk with Haka with USGS geologist Katie Milliken. So we're going to call this our volcano awareness presentation this week and just get this out front and center. And let's see, I think I forgot to add this in properly. So give me a second here, guys. Can we talk about this event that you guys had with Haka, where you had this filming?
Yeah, so this was our second iteration of these talks that we organized. The idea being is we've been having these prep fairs with civil defense, the Hawaii County agency that manages disasters here, and through them we were doing talks, organizing prep fairs. And at those prep fairs we had speakers, and we had not the greatest turnout for those speakers, so we tried it a different way. And instead we took the presenters and put them at the Maku'u Farmers Market at the peak time. So we were just trying to get people to stop by while they're out at the market, and any little bit that they get, awesome. So yeah, we had Katie Mulligan from USGS-HVO and Jen Myers from the county Kīlauea recovery department over there, and Kīlauea recovery team. Yeah, and this is the interview that came about during that event about not last Sunday, but a Sunday ago.
Mm-hmm. All right, so yeah, awesome. This is some great information that we're gonna get straight from the source here. So mahalo you guys for asking the questions, doing the filming, compiling the video, and all of that. And so here we go. I'm gonna push the button to present it. So let's hear from Katie.
Okay, we have two questions. First question is, so 147 days on this eruption, right? We've lost, you gained the V3 camera. Woo! But we've lost the AW, the F1, and the B1 camera. Are there any signs of those coming back online? And more significantly, the F1 camera.
Yes. So, and I will note that those cameras, so B1 was probably it's destroyed.
Yeah, it was melted, wasn't it?
It was melted, yeah. But the others were relocated. They were pulled from the field before they were destroyed. So we still have the F1 camera. But it's not trivial to establish a new camera site. So we have to get permitting from the National Park Service. And then the infrastructure to support a camera is pretty extensive. So we have usually a solar panel system, car batteries, antennas to relay the data back to HVO. So we are working on it, and the plan is to reestablish F1 and KW, and V3 has kind of replaced B1. So in some sense, B1 has been replaced. But yeah, we are working on it. It just takes time. And so, yeah.
And our other question from online.
Next question is going to take you to Mauna Loa.
See people doing it now.
It says, I've been browsing the GPS sensors and they show a lot of deformation. How close are we to pre-eruption levels prior to the last eruption?
Ooh. Okay. That's a good question. And we are seeing that Mauna Loa is slowly refilling with magma after the 2022 eruption. But we're not seeing elevated seismicity, so any earthquake activity. And the rate that refilling has been happening is really, really slow. So we're not close at all to any precursory pre-eruption level of activity. So still, Mauna Loa is still at background and green for the alert level and color code.
So you really look for all those different ingredients. If you just have eggs or just have flour or just have the water, you're not baking a cake.
No. Yeah.
Yep, you got to wait for everything to come together. Okay. What else?
So come back to the current eruption. We've seen the differences in what is an episode kind of evolve over time, and maybe let people know what is an episode. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So what is it gurgling? Is that an episode, or is it a turf drop?
Oh, great question.
And that's a good question, and I'll admit our definition has also changed over time as we've learned more as this eruption has progressed. So, you know, this it's one ongoing eruption because we have two vents that have stayed open and the lava is being erupted out of those same vents. An episode, for a little time, we were saying an episode began when lava exited the vent. But now our definition has changed a little bit based on, again, like we're seeing these repeated patterns in the monitoring data. So we're trying to define the episodes best based on those patterns. And the definition now is that an episode begins when the summit switches from inflation to deflation. So with every episode, we're seeing that when the eruption is not active, pressure is kind of building beneath the summit, and we're seeing that pressure build as inflation. At some point, you know, lava is exiting the vent and then fountaining starts. That system switches to deflation, and that's how we're defining the start of an eruption. So as that pressure is being relieved, as a fountain is erupting at the surface, that's the definition of a new episode. So yeah, it can be a little confusing because sometimes there's active lava on the surface, but we haven't yet stated that an episode has begun.
How many times have we been watching that live feed that we've seen that bubbling in the caldera and we're like, oh, here it comes, and then nothing.
Yeah, and it can, as you probably noticed, can take, I don't know, sometimes days.
Right,
even,
of that like gas pistoning effect where you get the caldera just kind of teasing a little bit, but then nothing. Yeah. So we got another one.
All right, Katie. Has there been any noticeable activity or anything happening of significant value in the Yanni?
No, we're not seeing any signs of activity out here in the lower East Rift Zone. It's been really quiet, and that's partly because we have this summit eruption. So, you know, the volcano is really summit focused right now. All the pressure's building at the summit, releasing at the summit when we have these episodes, and nothing is transitioning down into the Rift Zone. We did have the September eruption last year, and since then it's been really quiet, and that was on the middle East Rift Zone. So.
And I think it's a really important time to note, too, that earthquakes are really interesting in the fact that if you have the monitoring system that the USGS does, you're not going to have an earthquake happening anywhere on this island without multiple seismometers and seismographs indicating that there's an earthquake happening. So just because you don't have one of those systems very nearby you, it doesn't mean that you guys aren't able to hear and see what's happening across the entire island.
Yeah, and in fact, you need that network of instruments in order to locate an earthquake. Like one instrument won't give you that information. You need a whole network of them working together
to triangulate.
Triangulate, the position, the depth, and the magnitude of the earthquake. So, and again, we have over 100 of them across the island. So relatively good coverage.
We sometimes get a lot of comments that people are saying, you know, folks over in Puna, there aren't as many seismographs over there, or seismograms over there. So people are concerned that there's not as much monitoring, but you guys can still tell if anything happens in those areas. And you do pick up, even in Loihi, you know, there's no instrumentation near Loihi, but you still know when things are happening.
Yeah, and Loihi, there's a little bit of a certain magnitude event that we have a harder time locating because it is so far away and we don't have instruments on that volcano, but we can detect generally when things are happening. And same thing for Lower Puna, and we do have several instruments at Lower Puna and are looking to put in more, so we're hoping to expand that network, and coverage will be even better in the future.
Love hearing that.
Yeah.
Anybody from the audience having any additional questions? Ooh, we've got one over here.
Yes, I watch the USGS a lot, like every day, and I'm not seeing the SO2 readings. Is there a reason for that?
You're looking at the plots on our website, maybe? Okay, yeah. So we, the plots on the website are plotting a sulfur dioxide emission rate, which we have to manually go into the field and do traverses underneath the plume. So when the volcano is erupting, there's a plume of gas, and we have someone drive a vehicle underneath the plume. The road that we used to drive on has been pretty impacted by this eruption. So we used to drive in the closed area of the park, and that road has been covered with that tephra material. So the pieces of lava fountain that are kind of covering the road. So we haven't been able to get the emission rate as often. But we do have a system of instruments further out in the Ka'u Desert that can basically tell us what the gas concentrations are. So we are still monitoring the gas, we're just not reporting it in that same way. I talked about looking at patterns in this ongoing eruption, and seem like we've been able to show like when the episodes start and stop. It's very dependent on monitoring activity. These episodes have, from what we've been able to measure, have had really similar sulfur dioxide emission rates when they're active, so when there's active fountaining, and when there's a pause. So during pauses, we've made many measurements, even though we've, maybe not been able to measure every single pause, but many of the pauses that we have measured have had about 1,200 tons per day of sulfur dioxide, so pretty low. And then when the episodes are active and there's fountaining going on, it's been in the realm of 40 to 60,000 tons of sulfur dioxide per day. So we're kind of able to generalize, even if we're not able to measure that specific episode, we can say that when it's erupting, it's likely in this range. Yeah, and a good resource for that is the VOG information dashboard. If you're concerned about VOG and you live somewhere downwind, they are going to be plugging in those emission rates and then integrating it with the weather forecast models and able to show whether or not, certain areas are going to be impacted by VOG. So
we have a whole team that does VOG modeling here. Yeah.
All right, so that was awesome. You guys catching that from Katie and from Jen. She did awesome as well there.
Yeah.
And so
there was a lot to cover there and a bunch of interesting questions. And I'm glad that Katie just came out and answered a lot of them, right? Especially when it was like for the episodes, because we know the episodes definitions have changed, and it seems like we'll talk about it more, but there might be another small tweak in the works.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the background of maybe some information you were wanting to know that we didn't have answers to, that only they could provide. And so there we have it. And now that we know that, we can move forward again. And I think we will do just as she said and come to the VMAP project here. Let's remove that screen and put this one on here and share with you guys the volcanic hazard summary for this coming week here. So this is from Manoa. The forecast is showing this VOG coming across to the southwest ocean view area, maybe South Kona a little bit as well. That's the raw SO2, and when we click the SO4 layer, you see it spreads a little bit more into the central Kona area as well there. So that's just with the low level background stuff. And when we have one of these big puffs of gas, that's when it can really potentially, especially if the wind is strong and it's kept low to the ground and is able to stay in this lower part of the atmosphere and blow around, that's when it can really impact people. But overall, we have dominant trade winds this time of year coming into the summer here. Here's our Puna weather resource forecast from yesterday. Today through Saturday, light easterly trade winds with only isolated and brief showers, and Sunday and beyond, moderate east or northeast trade winds. That's the most important part for us there. So when the episode does come, USGS says between the next 3 to 7 days. It looks like there'll be trade winds, and maybe more importantly now will be this factor about whether it's going up into this upper part of the atmosphere or not. So, but for us here, I'll close this here. Let's look at the state of Hawaii air quality data here. And I see everything is in the green presently here. So as we expect, with not as much impact to the ground level. And here's Purple Air Citizen Science Network with monitors of people's residences updating the internet. And likewise, you see some slightly elevated values here in the central or south Kona, as is typically the case, but it's not anything terrible compared to what it can be during the massive outpourings of gas. And even closer by, within a national park, here is a National Park Air Quality Alert website, and their charts show green for all their stations that are online in the last 24 hours here. There's construction happening, of course, in the park, knocking a couple of them out. But there's a map view. Everything's green around this eastern and northern and southern sides of the caldera, and the wind is blowing from the northeast about 12 miles an hour presently. So that's keeping the impact far away from the viewing areas and all the residences and communities nearby here. So to look a little bit further, here's windy, showing that full atmosphere layer of SO2. And so you see a little bit more of it here, and you can see the dispersal pattern where it's actually caught this upper level and come back in this direction. It seems a little bit here, right, where maybe the lower level stuff likes to go this way. Once you get in the uppers, can come back towards the east here. And as we pointed out before from our satellite views, this is the Mountains project we're using now to take the SO2 band of the satellite and look here. So here's today, the 28th, showing a little concentration right around the volcano in this central area. And yesterday, the image we let off with in our summary here, that wide view, that's what we see replicated on the windy pattern as well there, showing that maybe that injection into the upper atmosphere really spread things out a lot, right? Now that would cause a lot of thought for the USGS, as we'll see here in a little bit. But this week, because we had such a visually stunning eruption, we're going to turn as our next segment here to the actual observations of what happened in this last week. So here are some live views to start us off. The V3 camera, that's what's currently happening. We're seeing this passive degassing, not a lot of movement in there. We don't see any spatter presently, although the USGS did fly over recently, and they looked down into the throat of the thing and saw a few tens of yards down the lava surface in there bubbling. And during the night, there is strong glow coming from both of these vents, north vent and the south vent. Here's a V2 camera looking from the other direction, and a V1 coming around even further. The current views of what's happening up on Kīlauea summit. So let's step back in time here to the USGS photo releases and look at this chronology released in the lead up to episode 23. Some views and flaming vents for the period of May 21st and 22nd. So let me play that video here to start. And here it is. North vent. Well, from the direction of the V1 camera, I think it's maybe a handheld camera here. And you see these flames bursting out there, and USGS reports this as hydrogen gas that's being ignited as it leaks from the vent. Pretty fascinating and interesting. That's something we've seen in this precursory build-up to several of the episodes recently. And there it is once again. So let's see what else they are offering. They're offering images of geologists using the FTIR, which is somehow harder to say than Fourier transform infrared spectrometer. And they're pointing it at this gas plume and essentially measuring all the different kinds of gases that are combined in there to make that plume. So that's what's going on in this image. Over here on the right, the new V3 camera site. So there you see the power source case with the batteries and the electronics inside. Out here, the actual camera presently on the tripod. And if we keep going and see the other images, the release of the V3 camera, which we had noted had been shaky before last week's update, and then last week they went and actually tightened it down, fixed something, and so here's what we actually see. They note that shaky due to strong winds because it was on a tall mast and it was moved to a more stable tripod setup. So they were seeing every 6 minutes loud episodes of gas and ash jetting while they're moving the thing to the tripod and hunkering it down here, weighing down the legs and making sure it's all well positioned. And there you see it. So you see this setup is the pan tilt zoom. It's a little bubble that can move it around and point different directions. So this is the one we just heard Katie Mulliken say that was the one that is somewhat replacing the B1 camera, right? So this is one that's a new one that didn't exist before. The B1 is out. Different views, unfortunately. I still like that B1 crater floor view where you can see the whole thing swelling up, but obviously the camera melted for a reason. You can't see that view anymore from right there. That's something that had to change for sure. So that's the first set of image releases here from earlier on. Let's move forward to episode 23 itself. So USGS has images released from that as well. So some photographs of the actual lava fountain itself as it's beginning to put flows across the caldera floor. And a farther panned out view showing not just the red of the fountain itself, but this darker part of the cloud, which is laden with all the tephra and Pele's hair and reticulite, etc. And then continuing further upwards, the massive gas cloud, that's the one USGS reporting rising to up to 29,000 feet above sea level. So here is another view of the lava flows exiting both the north and south vents here and traveling across the crater floor. And they put out a video, time-lapse video of the V3 camera, which we already showed you in our introduction, and we will play for you again here in not too long as well. So they noted here early on that the fountains reached heights of more than 1,000 feet, 300 meters. They then revised that later on to 1,150 or 350 meters, while the south vent reached more than 250 meters or 800 feet, as you see there. Early on, they're saying that the eruptive plume reached at least 5,000 feet in height, but as we'll see here in a little bit, they have revised that as well. So different fountaining geometries here. You see the south vent in the background putting out a tall fountain that's very skinny, and then this lower, broader one, and then the north vent here to the side doing an in-between version of it. Geologists up there watching, photographing, recording as well, looking at all the dynamics of the fountain, different class with temperatures and variable colors. The base of it, lava falls back down, maybe feeding back into that vent as the gas is jetting out. At the top of the fountain, where that lighter material continues drifting aloft, but this heavier material falls back down to the ground, potentially turning into cinder to build the hills or spatter against a crater wall, or landing in lava and feeding the flow itself that comes down across the crater floor. And you see here where many of those flows of lava merge or split and cool at the surface as they're still insulated and really, really hot on the inside, moving across the crater floor there. So here's those images. This is a nice one with that really skinny fountain from the north vent. I'm sorry, from the south vent, sticking up behind a north vent fountain over here with that lower south vent fountain over here as well. And the whole field of flow spilling out there at nighttime. So, all right, then there is another video included here, which is not something we've shown you yet. And this is highlights of the live streams themselves. So here we are at the very start from the V1 camera, the double spray that comes out of that little mound, little cone that's within the larger cone of the north vent. You see how quickly, this is in real time playing now, you see how quickly that transitions to this fountain, which is going to start to build up higher and higher and higher. So this is 4:30, it would be about 1 hour later at 5:30 that they recorded the highest fountains of this sequence here. So 5:30, there it is. Now we're looking from the V2 camera. You can see how high the spray is coming from the north vent, that massive force sticking out there. Look at the lava arcing up and flowing back in there. The south vent is also really active by this point in time over here, but it's not nearly matching the heights of the north vent yet. Once the north vent dies off here, the south vent will take over. Well, it doesn't die off, it lowers down, I should say, right? And then the south vent takes over with more of the height of the eruption. Really fascinating views there. As you can see that central channel of the spray, it's really moving, and on the outside a little bit less. Look at that massive cloud of dust and ash. It's falling back there in the background, not only just from the lava itself, but it's where it's landing on the ground, is knocking into other pieces of tephra and probably breaking the rocks and causing more dust. It's something we saw in a pool eruption as well. And here's a back crater wall. We've seen USGS report that's about 500 feet from the bottom of that vent into around there. So here we are clearly exceeding 1,000 feet and maybe just past that 1,500 or 1,150 foot peak right there. So that's the USGS release of that one. And they also note big lava bombs, almost 2 feet long, landing still fluid up on the rim of the caldera where they're walking around after the fact, scoping things out. So pretty fascinating to see the impact of that eruption there. So we just saw the live views. Let's play you once again the full compilation. This is a V3 camera to start. It's on the north vent higher there. Here comes the south vent getting higher itself with its lateral low spray still happening at the same time, feeding not only these flows, but you see this whole side of the hill continues to move, not just during eruption, but after it cools, it keeps moving quite a bit as well. We'll see that in one of the later shots. Now the V2 camera looking across the caldera from near Volcano House. There you see that hill moving over there. Right, this is basically building this giant lava shield area over the vents in this area here. There is the V1. We just saw that double spray, and here's what it became over those 6 hours. And pretty fascinating. It dies off at the end. Glow from the vents. The lava itself still moving, glowing that first night. Let's do that one more time. Double vent there. And we're going to have a look at all this black stuff coming across, and not just the hill moving, but big channels of lava pouring across. The largest one here in the south, we still see some flows coming towards the north. This near vent part of the crater seems like the lava floods a big area. You see it's more like a big pancake that spills out from there, and the longer flow ends up being this one along the south, but near the vent you see almost the whole caldera floor is getting covered here on the western side. Pretty incredible. All right, so there's the V1 through one last time as well. And for comparison from here, we'll go to the S2 camera, which is the one we had before the V3 was installed. So similar view to that one, but a little less smooth since we have fewer frames here. But here we go. Here comes the fountains, the flow, the cool down zone, and continuing glow from both vents that first night. Flow still moving the next day, and very slightly the day after as well. So different view. Here is a view from the Volcano House camera itself from the National Park Service. Zoomed in and tilted a little bit there, so you get a little bit better view of what it might have looked like. And you can see that massive first burst coming upwards there. It was that tallest fountain around 5:30 p.m. and the rest of the flow and activity in the nighttime until 10 p.m. or so. When we almost see these tears, a lava cascading over those lips, and those perched pond areas, perched lake areas. It's like a little flatter, and then steps down to another little flat zone and keeps going across. And that seems to be the lay of the land here in the central north part of the caldera. In the south, it's more of a ramp where you see this long runway for the flow to move all the way across. And so we'll switch now to the B1 camera, which is on the eastern side. The vents are this far back side over here. So there's a high fountain flow on that western cutter part. And that long flow that comes all the way across to the east comes across this rising here, this slope that's coming up within a downdrop block of the 2018 collapse, and diverts and spins back to the south over here. Pretty interesting. It's like a little fish hook that's forming up here, or the letter S. If your name starts with S, there's a nice big lava flow S that formed from this point of view here between the northern branch and the central branch here. The other thing to point out here is that this flow comes across, and in this area right through here, it's also adding more thickness to the area of the September 2023 eruption vents that were at one point in time on this downdrop block area that was not covered in lava. So as I zoom in here, you see this hill on the left is farther exposed, the one on the right a little less so, and the flow comes through at nighttime. But come daybreak, you'll see the one on the left is barely visible, and the one on the right is just looks like a little bit of an extra bump in the lava. So here it is before and after as well. So pretty fascinating to see those changes in the crater floor, lava moving across. We do not see any ooze-up flows in this sequence right here, and I'll show it to you as we zoom out in time and come beyond episode 23 to present as well. But let's stay focused in on just what was happening for that episode. And we did have that longer buildup in time, a longer pause. And so it is a question of what was going on. And as we've been doing recently, we're taking one image from noon each day from this point of view and comparing them to see if we're seeing changes in the crater floor. So let's zoom into this closer part of the crater floor right through here. And it's hard to see, it's a little subtle. There's definitely some changes in the shading and the light. But if you look, there is a slight wiggle here happening where the crater floor is moving up a little bit. It's not as fast as we've seen in previous weeks. Granted, this is just about a week of time here. But it does seem the lava is still injecting all the way over and feeding this reservoir under the crust of this hardened lava lake as well. So that might have something to do with this continuing pattern we're seeing here. As we mentioned, that eruption was quite high. After that initial report, USGS and their updates noted the Mauna Loa camera saw this view, and so they said, okay, well, it's got to be above 14,000 feet for sure, because that's the eye level of this camera, basically. And you look up, and you see the cloud peaking above you, way up here. And so that's part of their calculations of how high that thing actually was. And that was in the summary, but this next view was not. Bonus time lapse here from the Mauna Kea camera. So Mauna Loa was in the foreground. That last camera was right around in here somewhere, looking off at the eruption. And now from this angle, we can look over that southeast flank of Mauna Loa and see that gas cloud and glow from Kīlauea erupting at night as well. So this camera is also quite high up. I don't think it's maybe it's at 13 or 12,000 feet somewhere in there. But you can also see quite a high gas plume rising up here. And it looks like from this angle, it actually tips over here, right? So we're talking about, this is looking more or less to the south. We're talking about how in the lower parts of the atmosphere, the wind blows trade winds from the east to the west, northeast to the southwest. But once it hits this upper part of the atmosphere, it might be affected by that upper flow that's maybe associated with a jet stream, I've heard people say. I'm not an expert there, so I won't say any more than that. But you do see that once that plume gets higher up, it does turn. Pretty cool to note that right there. All right, and so that mattered because we're going to highlight this post from our volunteer, Yvonne Bauer. Yvonne is probably watching right now, also works at the park, also studies at UH-Hilo. And so post episode 23 surprise, and what they're noting is that what she's noting here is that she went to Mauna Ulu today and found a lot of fresh reticulite in the parking lot area and in the first mile of the trail. So that's this lightest tephra component of the eruptive phase here. So there you see it there. Different view of it there. Kind of breaks into a powder when you crush it, right? I had a doctor once on a tour tell me like our lungs have cells that have that reticular structure also to maximize surface area so you can absorb the most oxygen. And this is another one of these, that exact same pattern there, reticuli, that's maximum surface area. 99% void space, right? You normally think of pummices as something that are so light that they will float in water, but this one, all the airspace is all connected. So you put it in water and the water just flows right through it and it sinks, in fact. So really amazing, interesting stuff. This material reticuli that we have also documented that it takes decent height fountains to produce this stuff. Normally a fissure eruption won't do it. You need to have a centralized vent, centralized fountain to produce this material and then have it blown around, right? So that's really cool. And I just wanted to highlight here in the comments as well. There is a commenter from Ocean View noting Pele's hair in her yard over there. And so there's another report here. Someone was driving north from Halemaʻumaʻu Overlook around 6 p.m. and this stuff was drifting in the wind like big snowflakes and similarly made no sound against the windshield. And a friend was riding his bike on Chinakriters Road in Mana'ulu during it and reported it was falling on them. So lots of different reports here of what was happening with that fallout. So with all that said, I think now is the time to interrupt our observations for the Volcano Watch this week, which is the USGS updating their alert notifications because of these new heights of the fountains. So this is was just released, I'm not sure, maybe an hour or two ago. And they're noting here officially the heights of 1,150 feet, 350 meters, highest winds observed so far during the current eruption. Left an impressive blanket of tephra beneath and downwind of the fountains, primarily in the upper part of the southwest rift zone in a closed area of the park. Here is also where they say the episode had the highest gas plume seen thus far, reaching heights of more than 20,000 feet, 6,100 meters for sure, and likely over 25,000 feet or 7,600 meters. And that's above Kīlauea summit, which itself is an elevation of 4,000 feet or 1,200 meters above sea level. So altogether, 29,000 feet above sea level, or 8,800 meters above sea level or so is the height of that plume, composed of high levels of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, in case you were curious about that. So that was it within that first hour of eruption there. And when you have that impact that high into the atmosphere, then clearly it's a threat to aviation. The stuff can fall in a wider area. There's all kinds of different kinds of impacts there. So because of that, they are rethinking. They see, of course, episode 24 looks like it's on the way. And we don't know if we'll have another episode like this one. Will it produce both tall lava fountains and a massive gas plume into the atmosphere? But if it does, they are now going to be more cautious and reissuing aviation alerts every single time. And so what they were doing was issuing status report notifications, but instead they're now going to use the VAN/VONA, which is Volcano Activity Notice and Volcano Observatory Notice for Aviation. There's some bureaucratic jargon for us all there. The VAN/VONA, I'm not sure how we're going to abbreviate that, right? But they're going to announce the beginning and end of fountaining episodes. But as we'll see later, they are not going to be changing the color as they've done in other times in the past as well. So that is the long and short of it there, right? That they in the past would issue things like warning red when we had the beginning of an eruption, when you thought that there might be higher levels of gas into the atmosphere. But since we had before this one 22 episodes of activity without any such impact, they got in the habit of not needing to do that after the very first one. And now they're realizing that things have changed. And that is the new way things will be done going forward. So, all right, that's Volcano Watch, and we'll finish off, come back to our observations here and finish us off for our break and look at a little bit more of this bigger picture beyond what happened just in this episode. So to start off here, this is the full week since episode 23 from the B1 camera, just so you can see the darkness across the crater floor, no ooze flows or anything really changing ever since that lava came across the crater all the way over here. So we'll keep it moving. Let's go back to the whole month of May and look at the daytime views of noon every day, the whole month of May. So hopefully what you can see here is the crater floor is filling. Some of this is from the lava flows coming from the vents, which might happen not at noon, right? And so they can come and lay new layers of lava on the surface. But also what we're looking for is areas that don't have changes in their surface appearance, but are actually rising upwards from this injection of lava. Since it was a little hard to see for that last view, and if any of you guys are new viewers, this is what we're talking about. It's this process. If you can see clearly in the foreground here, the texture changes. There's new flows that come like the one we saw in this S-shaped snake flow. But other parts, like let's come over here. This zone right in here is not getting covered in lava. You can clearly see it rising upwards like a loaf of bread right there. And this, if you start looking more closely, you see there's lots of areas that do that. It's not uniform across the entire caldera floor. There's areas like this one don't seem to move at all, but areas in the foreground do move. Right, so it's interesting to note. Right here it's rising, and right here it's not. So you start forming this little scarp in between with this crack and a shadow on the texture of the surface here. But to come back to our September 2023 cinder cones, you can see that they also move upwards as well, rising, injecting from below and kind of floating upwards, but also they're being buried by lava flows on the surface as well. And here you can more clearly see the progression of burial. Move this farther west cone and this eastern cone, which was not the most eastern cone previously because those ones were also buried by lava. And as that's occurred, we've almost lost all trace of that September 2023 eruption under this 2024 to 25 eruption. So yeah, that's pretty impressive to me. We'll move on from that though and look at the S2 camera. And so we'll come back here. This is the full view from last week, showing the buildup, the glow, a little bit of that precursor activity, some spatter, ooze up flows, lava spills in the crater floor very briefly. Then comes our episode. Lava moves still the next day, and the next day a little bit more. Glows from the north vent, the south vent, also glowing, not clearly visible in at that speed right there. But there we are today, waiting for the next episode. So recharging, but still have a ways to go on that. And to kind of wrap up this first half of the program here, maybe it's a little more than half, but we'll show you guys this view from the K2 camera, which is up at Wikahuna, showing the newly opened viewing area down there and people walking up and seeing the gas outpouring for a couple of days before the eruption. There's a lights at nighttime, and here comes the day. And some people were lucky to be there and see the lava fountaining. And since then, people are still visiting that area, which has been opened as a park announced, and I imagine is in Lou's community report, which is what we'll turn to next here. So pass it to you, Lou and Dane.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get into the community corner. What do you think, Lou?
Sounds good to me. Let's see if we can get this in here. Here we go. All right, so we do have, it's like every week there's something new in the park, which is kind of nice. This is a long-awaited part of the whole construction process. Do you know what's coming, Dane?
Yeah, the viewing area.
Okay, spoil it. This is the one part of the construction that I was really looking forward to, because since the fountain started getting up above the cliff, I've been saying this is one of the best shots that since we've taken so many shots around the caldera, This is one we haven't been able to take over the years. So now it's a beautiful area. So let's jump into this. I guess I'm gonna have to change this shot from Yvonne. Instead of tephra, we're gonna need reticulite on the ground. All right, so here we go. This is the new area that is up at Waikahuna that was the old Jagger Museum. So visitors sitting on the historic stone wall at Waikahuna observation deck watch lava fountains from episode 23rd, Fire Up Over Caldera Rim. And that's what I'm talking about. Just an epic shot. You can't see down into the vents, but nonetheless, just an amazing spot.
Right. It's a lot different and a lot more accessible than when I was a kid and having to walk out to the Kalapana flow and
right,
walking out 10 miles or 8 miles or however far out it was that day. To just be able to drive up there and see fountains that close is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally 2 minutes from your parking to walking out to this point right here. It's great. So I did put a map over here in case anybody was curious on where the old Jagger Museum was or the Waikahuna overlook is if you come through the main gate and you just keep driving all the way past the visitor center, the old visitor center, the Volcano House, Steaming Bluffs, KMC, and just keep going and it'll take you right up there. I have it circled there. This is another spot here. This is let's get
rid of that thing.
Yeah, I saw that. The new connector path between Waikahuna and the Crater Rim Trail. So now it's all connected. So you don't have to walk all the way around. Before we were having to go from the parking lot and walk around the construction and then down to the Kīlauea overlook that was down below it. So it's a nice trail through here. Another shot from Yvonne. And here's some of the benches that they put in there to hang out and relax in. And if you look down here on the ground, right here, those are outlines from the old Jagger Museum. So it's kind of nice to see they kept them.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool there.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's that shot of where that lookout is. Bathrooms.
Not the greatest angle, but the proximity. And I will say this, the likelihood of it closing in one of the episodes, kind of high. All it takes is the winds to be last episode, the winds were very helpful, right?
Yeah.
Blowing their trade wind patterns out into the Ka'u Desert. Those winds shift. We get a little bit towards the north. We've seen before up to KMC get shut down with visitors just because of the Pele's hair and all the tephra that's falling, and it's probably for the best.
Yeah, definitely be on alert when you're up there because winds do change.
Yeah.
I'll say though that I do wonder what the sound sounds like from there, right? That's one of the closest places you can be to it.
It's got to be
wind
good.
is blowing the other way. I wonder what it would sound like from there being that close. Another interesting place to experience.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's definitely that spot that you want to go to, even if you go all the way over to Keanakekoi. If you have the time, just drive up there because it's a 1 minute walk from your vehicle to walk out to that lookout, and it's just so worth it. And here's another shot, an aerial shot, in case anybody's curious. And you can see right in through here. This is the edge that you can't look down to see the eruption happening actually into the vents, but the fountain is coming up over the top there. Plenty of parking. And I was going to say that there's still the porta potties up there. There will be permanent flush toilets eventually when they finish the construction. There is construction everywhere still. Some days it's flowing. Some days you're driving through a labyrinth. So go slow. Follow the signs. KFC Visitor Center is closed. We go up to the KMC camp now, which is the Welcome Center. You can follow the parking lot signs for there. And this is someplace you can park. And let's just say you wanted just to spend a little bit more time there. You could park here and walk up to Waikahuna Lookout. So this is a good place if the parking lot was full or if you just wanted to spend some more time on the trail. There's a look at our Welcome Center, You know, by the time they get this open, the new one open, I'll have this down and I'll totally screw up the other one. And I have a new picture, and that is our good friend Ranger Dean right there. And he's one of the rangers that does life on the edge. And I recommend asking if he's available for the next run of it if you're up there. Dean is a great guy. Let him know I sent you. Learn about Hawaii geology, culture, plants, and animals. It's going on 4 times a day, 10, 11, 1, and 2. It's 30 minutes long. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. And summer at the Hawaii Keiki Museum, there is all kinds of events. Dane, did you sign up for the build your own computer?
I still haven't learned that part.
No, or coding camp.
Or coding camp? Yeah,
let's get updated.
Hey, ChatGPT, I need you to make a program for me.
Well, June 2nd through June 2nd through the 6th is the first on the books, and that's Build Your Own Game Boy. So discover, create, play, and learn about Hawaii. Learn about island science. The Hawaii Keiki Museum connects children to Hawaii Island through hands-on exploration of science, technology, and engineering. I put it's over in Waikoloa. I put the address and the phone number. If you have Keiki here and you're looking for something for them to do during the summer, definitely check them out. They have some great programs over there, and they also have miniature golf.
Hey, that's rare out here.
It's extremely rare. We have 2 bowling alley. What do we have? Do we have a bowling alley up in Waimea? I don't think so. So we just have 2 bowling alleys.
One at Kona and then one at the KMC at the military camp.
That's it. So
that's it.
Next in line is putt. Well, have you signed up for our email list, either our monthly newsletter or our volcano eruption notification? There is the way to do that, hveri.org/subscribe, and we have been busy sending them out every single week. And and you can scan that QR code right there, and that'll take you right to the page.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lou. Yeah, we want to just go ahead and thank everybody that helps make this possible. The Boona Strong, the Kīlauea Recovery, as well as the Vai grants through the Hawaii County and supported by the Hawaii Community Foundation. All their help over the years help get the nonprofit going, helps fund and support this project, as well as our other programs in digital resilience and youth development. So a big mahalos to them, as well as everybody that tuned in today, right? The likes, subscriptions, the shares, the donations, all that stuff helps. We do donations through super chats, but we encourage people to go over to hveri.org/donate. I hit the wrong button. There we go. Donate. And those are tax deductible because we are a 501c3 community-based organization. And I'd like to thank all of our partners as well. And we have some new ones we might need to add to that list too. But
yeah, we do.
All right. Well, thank you, Lou.
Did you get the super chats that were in there? I have a couple super chats.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do those. Miss those. We had a 26. I'm just gonna say $25, right? Because what's happening with things like this, or it's an awkward number, is they're paying for the service or the fees from the payment processor. So they're donating and covering some fees on top. So it's a $25 super chat there, or a donation from Katrin, and then Mark with a $50. Oh, whoops, that one was a question. And then a $25 from Linda, coming all on the HVERI website. And then the super chats, we had Norm come through with a $10 super chat, Norm from Hawaii, and Dawn, as always, funding pizza extravaganzas on Friday. $10 for pizza tomorrow for Dane and Phil, or Phil and Dane. I'm not actually doing pizza for tomorrow for once. Well, thank you there, Dawn. I appreciate all the support. And there, I think we have it.
We got it. Yep, that's it.
All right. Thank you, Lou. And with that, we will pass it back to Phil for the back half of this thing.
Oh, wait a second. We got one more thing on there. Oh, I'll get it before we go because we need to talk about our survey.
Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
I lost my screen. Hold on a second. Give me a second.
Yeah, see if there's any Shark Tank people out there listening that want to come and start some mini golf or bowling ventures out here on a big island. You're more than welcome. Starving market for it.
Yeah, we used to have a big old bowling alley in Hilo, and now it's BJ Penn's gym.
Right? And Papa John's.
And a Papa John's. Can't forget the Papa John's.
All right, one more thing I wanted to add in here. I just didn't click. Ding got me on. I had our Puna Strong stuff up first, but we are asking you to please take a minute and go ahead and you can use that QR code. I'm going to drop the actual link in the chat in a minute here. It's our annual impact snapshot survey. We use this to do what we do. We want to know how everybody engages with social media. And if you live on Kīlauea or Mauna Loa, this definitely will help all of us. So please take a minute and fill out that survey for us.
Yeah, thank you, Lou, for getting that in there. Yeah, we definitely need to get as many of those as we can. It does help as well. If you can't donate and you still want to support and do more than just sharing the video, the survey is a good way to do so.
Especially if you're local. Especially if you're local.
Now we'll pass it back to Phil for the back.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Dane. All right, so let's turn to Kīlauea monitoring. And we'll start off with the text updates USGS issued. And I'm going to come back to 1 week ago on Thursday during our last update when they had noted that precursor activity for 23 had begun the previous day of the 21st. And that's all I'll say for that day. We'll move forward to note that they're still seeing precursor activity. Everything was delayed by a slowdown in inflation. They're still seeing glow and spatter. That's still true on Saturday. They had actually start to see some overflows after this update on Saturday. So come to the Sunday update. We may see that in there. Let's see here. Minor fountaining up to 20 meters, 65 feet in the north vent midday yesterday, accompanied by a spillover of lava onto the crater floor. Similar event occurred overnight, also in the north vent, similar to the previous lead-ups. So we'll keep moving forward from Saturday to Sunday, 5:33 p.m. They note episode 23 began at 4:15 p.m. with the onset of sustained lava fountains. So sustained at 4:15. Lava flows started covering the floor. The north vent activity escalated to high fountains by 4:50 p.m., although a later update will actually note 4:25 p.m. And south vent followed at 5:15 p.m. And within that first hour, they had already seen more than 1,000 feet, 300 meters from the north vent. That peak was just probably as they were typing this out, while the south vent was still lower at that point and going to build back up. And so we come to the status report, as was the old way of things being done before this Van Vona era we're going to move into now. They note the end of the eruption at 10:25 p.m. They note the south vent reached more than 800 feet. They start talking about that giant ash cloud. We'll just skip over all these numbers that get revised later on. Come to Monday, and we get the most complete summary here. They note the 4:25 p.m. Sustained fountains, thin jets at 4:15. The tremor intensifying at 4:36 p.m., as well as that is when they see the change from inflation to deflation. They note sulfur dioxide emission rates estimated between 50,000 and 75,000 tons per day, and note the Mauna Loa summit webcam images at that point as well. They note the north vent ceased first, 9:48 p.m., followed a little more than half an hour later at 10:25 p.m. by the south vent also shutting off. And so that's the summary of the text updates. Although the USGS then on the 28th did note that image analysis confirms that they had actually seen 350 meter or 1,150 feet high fountains around 5:30 p.m. on the 25th. And that's what was reinforced in our Volcano Watch that we saw published today. So that was what we saw for the updates through the eruption. Today's daily update notes continuing glow. The next 3 to 7 days is when they expect episode 24 to begin. So they note stronger and more frequent glow from the north vent, although visible in both vents. Degassing continues, and inflation is ongoing as well. move on from that one to the latest update, which is actually an information statement issued at 3:21 p.m. today, just as they were getting ready to publish Volcano Watch in preparation for that as well. This rollout of this new way of doing things, where they will start issuing the VAN VONA with no change in volcano alert level or aviation color code. Just noting the start and stop, because that's one hazard for aviation starts and stops as well. So that's what they're doing from that point forward. Information does not change, only notification type will change. And that is, the rest of it's basically summary through here. So that's the text update we actually have. They have also updated their timeline a little bit here as well. I haven't seen the change yet in this duration column as far as how they're defining it and all of that. They haven't gone back and fixed that necessarily. But they've added this entire column over here on the right, approximum maximum fountain height meters, which before we're trying to derive from their text updates. And so now they actually seemingly, including image analysis, have gone and updated all those. And so here we see that 350 meters for episode 23 with 6 hours fountaining phase, following a 9-day pause. And there you see how things are being laid out now. So to recap the chart that we actually had, so let me explain what's going on here. It's slightly different than before. What I've done is put in the figures from that table are now in red. And orange is the USGS data also, but from the text updates at the time of the eruption. Right, so it's about roughly a similar pattern. But what you can see here is that some of them actually end up being higher. They were saying it was going to be about 1,000 feet for 300 meters for episodes 15 and 16, and now are saying 325 meters, which is a little higher than that, right? So in excess of 1,000 feet there. Similarly, some of these other ones have higher peaks. Some of them at the beginning were a little bit lower than originally estimated, perhaps in too much excitement, but you can see overall it's pretty much the same pattern there. So that's the revision. Moving forward, we'll probably use the USGS table since that image analysis seems more reliable than the text reports, but this is our bridge version here, our bridge week, to show you how they stack next to each other here. So other data we have, duration by episode. What I'm doing here is in orange, from when the first lava flow leaves the cone, which was the earlier definition of when the thing actually began, to what seemed like the more important part of the episode, the vigorous eruptive phase, the higher fountains, when the tilt drops, all that stuff in red, right? So the red is the actual intense duration, and orange is maybe some part of the buildup after it starts spilling out. It's not capturing all the pistoning and the spattering happening before that, because that seemed to add even more complications to the graph here. So, but what you can see is we had a similar lead up as far as flows as we've had in some recent eruptions. They've been getting longer overall, right? If you look at everything post episode 14, we're seeing these longer lead up times, and that's paired with shorter vigorous eruption times as well. Right, on average, you see a couple of exceptions happening right in here as well. Yeah. So over here, all I've done is add in blue the pause that follows the episode as well. Right? So you can see that some of the episodes have big variability. I consider the first 3 to 4 episodes here to be that kind of establishment phase, and really I'm looking from then on and what the patterns really are. So you can kind of see from here that the pauses were from episode 7 on fairly long. They seem to have dropped a little bit here in the last month or so, but the most recent one has extended it back again to where we're having this extended cycle once again. So that's how it looks in graph form right there. In case you're curious, the last couple of episodes have done weekends for us, so we're actually catching up on our statistical anomaly here that we mostly were erupting on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and now we've added a couple of Saturday, Sundays as far as overflows and fountains here, whereas before we showed you this plot, there was nothing on a Sunday at all. Like Sunday seemed to have caught the memo and is trying to pull its weight now. So we'll see if we stay on a 7-ish day cycle or if we extend and keep offsetting. Well, just the curiosity of statistics here, really, what's what this actually is. So this is the most recent map from a couple weeks ago showing that location of the vents and this whole crater floor. I had another image. I don't think made it all the way into there. Let's see if I can find this image and drop it in here. What I was trying to do is give you some measure of the crater floor. Maybe I don't have it quite right now, but if you look at this measure down over here, you can measure that from here across to where the flow ended up over here, and that's about that 1.33 miles or 2.1 kilometers distance. I'll have to show you that image another time since I seem to have lost it right now. Oh, I think I know where it is. I think it is right here. Right there, there it is. So each of those is 1,000 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 feet about along that azimuth going across there. And you do the math, that's 1.33 miles or 2.1 kilometers. And further across that direction, but this flow that didn't go all the way where there was flow happening over here. So I thought that was a fair measure of what we had going on today. Okay, moving on from that. I think there was a question flashed up that maybe had something to do with this. This is a map back from January, but it's the most recent one that shows us a cross-section of elevation above sea level and the profiles of the crater as they've been before the 2018 collapse up here in gray, following it in this dark gray to black down here, when it was refilled with water at first, then at first eruption that filled that innermost pit here to this magenta color. The next one's filling it even further and further. We've filled that entire inner pit already where we don't see the trace of it anymore. We're now sending flows all the way across onto this downdropped crater, downdrop block here of the crater. And where you see the edge of these colors over here is about where the lava flows are lapping up. I would expect that we're now, I don't know, I'd guess somewhere like that, something like that. So this is where that slope is rising up here, and the flows are not getting past that little lip yet. They have to kind of keep filling successively over time to encroach slowly, one episode at a time, further and further the field here. So that's giving you some of the scale, right? You can see that as far as the depth here, we've recovered a lot of the depth. But one question we often get is about the volumes and how long will things take to recover. And I was hoping to be able to make some really pretty graphs, but I was not able to do that for you guys. But what I can do is show you guys a little projection we have here, a little unofficial projection on how we go about doing this through this table. So I know this might lose some people that are not into the math, but if you're still here after an hour 15, then maybe you're into it enough that I'll just show you the long and short of it, what's going on. So to start with, every eruption since 2018 has a certain volume that's been reported by the USGS, and we know the dates that it started and ended for how long it actually lasted. So each of those has successively filled the crater, and altogether we can add them up to how much in total volume have we recovered since 2018. Let's move past that first thing. You can pause and look back if you want to know those numbers beyond that. To get to some projection of how long will it take, there's two ways to go about this. They're giving us some kind of a range of this, and the range is greater than that as well. So if we look at our full volume of this eruption so far, the last 5 months, over 23 episodes, or in this case, 21 episodes is what we have the volume for. The average is about 4.5 million cubic meters per episode is what's going on. The high we've seen reported is 5, episode 18. The low I've seen reported is episode 20 was 2.5. The most recent one, 22, they said 3.8. That's the range of what's going on here, right? So the USGS notes that we lost 825 million cubic meters in 2018. And here's how much we've actually recovered, which means this is how much is actually left. Now, to note, this number right here actually counts the whole broad area, not just the inner pit, but like the sagging that occurs on the edges of it as well. So that's the broad area of it as well. So there's another way to measure this, and that's the whole crater floor. If you were to match that flat all the way back across and fill all that in, what would that value be? And that you have to get from a DEM, and this is the value that's the closest I could get to it right there. And so likewise, this would be how much is left, right? So this is to have the caldera back full and to have the entire loss recovered. So if our per episode number is 4, then to refill the whole broad area would take another 134 episodes, which would take 2.5 years if it happens once a week, which puts it there to the end of 2027 into 2028 would be how long it takes to recover all of this, right? So years is the answer in that case, right? And to follow it through, let's give ourselves an easier target. Let's say we just want to get to the flat crater floor, so it just looks full, even though we can't see the sagging recovered. Then it might be only 68 more episodes. Remember, we're at 23, so that would mean we'd have to go a long way further, another year and a third. That would take us to the last end of 2026, and we'd have to keep going at this pace, and I'd be averaging 4, right? If it were to average 5, let's make it 5 and see what happens. So maybe best case scenario, maybe 1 year to the inner part or 2 years to the broad part. Okay, what if it's 3? Make it 3. Now you're looking at 3 years or 2 years. So no matter what, it would have to stay at that pace for years, right? This is the one way to do it. Method A. Method B would be look at what eruption rates happen to be. So you look at the whole volume of the eruption of all 21 episodes to this point, and you figure out how long it's been. That gives you 7.7 cubic meters per second. That's the overall whole eruption, right? But here's the thing. If you look at some subsets of that, 12 to 14, that was at almost 12. 14 to 18, it drops to 7. 18 to 21, it dropped to a little bit less than 3. 22, it jumped back up again to 8.8. So what number do you actually use of all these ones, right? If you use the most conservative estimate, let's say the most recent one, most recent 4-ish episodes, 3.8 cubic meters right there. Then what we know is from our GIS program, our DEM, about how much lava it takes to refill to get to a certain elevation. So we know that the high point of a lava lake in 2018 was at 1,031 meters above sea level. The caldera floor itself, which was the rim of Halemaʻumaʻu, was 29 meters higher at 1,060 meters above sea level. And the actual lowest part of the whole caldera, if you're thinking about when would it actually spill out of there, that's in the southwest. That's 1,100 meters right here, right? So at this rate, here is the values. End of 2026, you might reach the bottom of Halemaʻumaʻu again. By late 2027, once again, the caldera floor, and you might get to the point where it could spill out of caldera by late 2028. That's at this 3.8. If you note that this value is going down, what if this happens to be just, let's make it 3. Now we're to 2029, right? What if it goes down to 2.5? And this is the biggest unknown that we have, is the variability of that, right? Now we go to 2030. So all we can really say is it would take years. The soonest, if it keeps going gangbusters, which is the least likely thing to happen, maybe within 1 to 2 years, but more likely you're looking at more years than that. And what we've seen in the past is nothing stays stable for years. It always changes. We've had now 9 eruptions in the last 7 years. So we haven't had years to go on any single one of them to do this much work. And so that is the answer of how long it might actually take. So moving on from that, to show you guys the mountains project here, we showed you guys the fallout of Tephra, the lava footprint within the crater is a speckled area, the fallout of Tephra with that long arm to the southwest back in here. And that's the most recent 6-day frame from the 28th. And so just so we can compare, these are essentially capturing 5 or 6 days or capturing 1 episode each. So this was episode 23. We go back to the previous one. We see that there was slightly different direction, but also impact on the rim over here for that previous one at 22. One before that was a little bit smaller as well, 21. And so you can see that changing pattern there. And there's 20. Right? You can see that this little area in the southwest, we've seen a little bit sometimes this zone of inflation in a shallower part of the southwest rift. Does not appear as strongly this most recent week. So something transient and not dominant, but interesting still. And that's what we have for the satellite data here. So to keep things moving along, let's look at just the last month of Kīlauea data here. Here is our summit East Rift tilt. East Rift is in green. Steady deflation on the East Rift. No magma is going in there. There's nothing changing over there. Here is our tilt for Kīlauea Summit, episode 23, you see had a larger drop than any of the other ones within the past month, and that followed a longer buildup than any of the ones in the past month as well. And it has this different pattern where we had not only this steeper part of the rise, but also a little bit longer extended wiggling flat zone through here. And then a second rise came up before we had the actual beginning of the episode and release of pressure through here. We'll come back to that, but a similar pattern, we see that in the Sandhill tilt meter as well. So there's that same pattern there. Earthquake counts are nothing really to point out. Really, most of the pressure is coming out through the fountaining. And the earthquakes we're seeing here mostly on the south flank and in a deep Pahala feeder zone, as we'll see in the map there. So for the last 3 months, here is our episode 23. You can see that we had similar large drops in the past as well that also followed similarly long buildups. So it's just another one of these. We didn't have quite this same pattern like this on some of these other episodes here. It's been actually pretty well behaved as far as coming up and dropping fairly steadily. Occasionally there's a little bit of a flat spot, but not extended. There's a little bit of a flat spot, but none of them has lasted nearly as long as the one we've seen in episode 23 here. So that's the thing to point out. And maybe right here is where I'll pause, and let's just turn to the historical record for some context. What we have here is professional paper 1350, volume 1, and this is recapping the high fountaining phase first of Mauna Ulu. So down here, these tall bars are the actual fountaining episodes. The low bars, that's their low-level activity. So you can see they actually had low-level activity start to come in advance of episodes about halfway through as well, similar to what we're seeing here too, right? So what I'm trying to show you guys is that they also might have had some of these. That's a very first build-up, but then here they're coming up, dropping down, coming up, dropping down. Oh, now they start having a little bit of wiggle, drop down. This one has got a nice little wiggle. That one does too. This one actually goes wiggle down a second time. And then finally, later on, does it actually show another episode? 11 looks well behaved, but between 11 and 12, it's doing all this stuff before it actually goes again. So you can see that there's no way to read from the tilt signal what is or isn't going to happen. The tilt could do anything, and it could still be fountaining, as we can see from the record, not just from Mauna Ulu. But here is Pu'o'o, episodes 1 through 20 to start. And so let's get past this initial phase right here to where it becomes a little more stable. Pretty good pattern right through there. You have an extra peak. Here you see the first little sign of a slowdown and a peak. You have an extra little slowdown there. Another one over there too. Look between 12 and 13. It does this whole extra little wiggle. And it gets regular again all of a sudden between 13 and 18 again. And now we start seeing wiggles again. So you can see it's really anything can happen. And to zoom it out, because we'll have more episodes than that. So that was 20. Here we are to 25 to 30, regular once again. And then here you start having some funny ones happening once again towards the end. So you really can't say anything from the pattern we're seeing in the tilt that anything is changing. It's just something changed with the mechanics of it building up to get out, but it hasn't changed anything as far as it actually erupting. What would it look like when it's actually done, perhaps, is a question that maybe no one's asked, that I've heard anyone ask yet. But let's look at this pool record right here is when things changed from high fountaining to low-level effusion out of the vent from the side of Kupainaha. And so that last one right there, the tilt dropped and it stayed down and it never came back up. So that's the key right there. Every one of these other ones, the tilt's coming back up again. When you see the tilt coming back up immediately, recovering, that's telling you that process is still ongoing. It's still cycling. What we're looking for when it actually would change to end is something more like it's dropped down and that's doing something really funny. What's going on now? That'll be the sign that we'll see, that we'll be looking for a more major change in what's going on. So that's the historical context. And maybe one more thing to throw in here while we're in this paper. That was a special information report, 2018-5109, which is episode 21 through 48 from Tim Orr et al. And so what I want to point out here is Pu'o'o average discharge rate in cubic meters per second compared to maximum fountain heights, right? So overall, you can see that, maybe there is, certainly you can have high discharge rate with high fountains, but you could also have lower discharge rates with the same height fountains and higher discharge rate with low fountains. It's kind of all over the place all through here. So it's hard to tell exactly how much is coming out just from how high the lava is shooting in the air. That's one thing to note. Their time span between high fountaining episodes also has variations, but you can see overall down in this lower zone, they're lower than the later zones where they become lengthier as well. So that's something we've seen in the past too. And most striking, episode duration in hours by fountaining episode number. Clearly, they get shorter and shorter over time, eventually stabilize at a fairly short interval. And so it's getting more efficient perhaps, but that's what we're seeing here as well too, right? So we're seeing that we saw a 6-hour high fountain phase, which was fairly short compared to our average. And that seems to fit the historical context as well. So that's the monitoring signals we're seeing here. We can look a little bit more on what we have on Kīlauea here, but mostly the earthquakes are pretty quiet. Earthquakes per week are very, very low. GPS is pretty stable, north and south. The rift zone is showing a little more wiggle as we said up top. We'll wait for this to clear up in the following weeks here and see what it actually means. It looks like maybe it's stabilizing. Maybe there is something starting to change there, but it's nothing major like we saw last summer when we had an intrusion of magma clearly coming in and spreading the rift zone apart. So nothing like that going on. Looks more like noise in the data right there. So earthquake counts are still pretty low, and maybe the best way to wrap things up here is to turn to our recent earthquakes and show you guys the last week. Here it is plotted by depth. You see some shallower events in the reds and oranges up through here. These can be adjustment events as well as the deep ones offshore. So long as you don't have clusters in time and space, that's normal part of the background. And then more closely, we have a little bit of adjustments under Kīlauea summit and on the south flank, and a little bit here in this southwest part of Kīlauea, southeast part of Mauna Loa as well. And the blues are the deep Pahala feeder zone. So all that looks normal, actually a little quiet, pretty low numbers there altogether. So looking at the largest event in the last week was a 3.9 offshore, 24 miles down. Adjustment of the island moving across the whole tectonic plate moving across the hotspot and beyond. All the adjustments of temperature and space and all that. The next one is a 3.1, also offshore, shallower, but another adjustment as well. The next one, another 3.1 offshore Kona as well. And everything else is under 3. So Kona wins the 3 largest of this last week, Kona side. We have a deep Pahala 2.7, 2.4 by Waiohino, somewhat shallow in that adjustment zone between Kīlauea and Mauna Loa. And then finally, we have a 2.3 as our largest summit event of the current eruption happening now. Then we'll stop our earthquake review right there. And that's where we'll wrap it up. We can talk about any questions or have discussions about what we've covered here, but that wraps it up for our monitoring data for the week.
Right. Yeah, well, we've got a couple questions here. First one we'll do is from Chip, who asks speculation question. Could it be possible that the magma conduit under the vents are more horizontal rather than vertical, perhaps a V shape since we have 2 vents?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. Or you could even have some little wiggles, or a little, I don't know if you could really have an S curve necessarily, right? But the image that strikes me, and I wish I had it pulled up now, I'm trying to remember for next week, but there's an image of, I think it's Don Swanson and Jeff Judd at Mauna Ulu looking down into the throat of the thing during one of the pauses in its high fountaining phases. And you can see the septum of lava that's hardened in there. It's got this kind of snaky shape, and it's all just, and lava was shooting out of that stuff into the air. In that case, 1,800 feet. And it's a double fountain with a double spray coming up as well. And it also would sometimes one would go and the other one would not go. So that's what I think of as like it could be it's some funny geometry in there, and it must change over time as well. Every episode is building up and pushing lava out. However, it actually manages to flow out through the gas, carrying the lava as well. That can just maybe it sculpts it a little bit more, or some chunk of the cone falls in and starts blocking it. It has to get pushed to the side, but now it changes the shape of the thing. All those kind of variations are likely contributing to the exit points of lava there, right? And that's, we can only speculate since there's probably not enough time. And I'm not sure that any of the robots we've made that can go down into fissures and vents can go into one that still has lava in it. They'll just be a sacrifice to Kīlauea, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, right. Just get a live stream going on a DJI drone and just fly it in there real quick.
We need a golem to like go in there and check it out for us, right?
Right.
That kind of
there
thing.
you go. We'll do one more question I got here from Nathan asks, is more lava coming in through the hotspot in the last few months, or is it just emptying the area above it?
That's another great question. I don't have a great answer for it. I think if we were to speculate a little bit, we've seen an increase in the earthquakes in Pahala over the last 5 years or so, maybe even a little longer than that. And that's more the time frame, or longer than that. What was like 8 years now? It was before 2018 we saw them come up, but really picking back up even further in the last 5 years. That seems like it must be related to more magma coming through the hotspot, in my opinion, right? And so how long it can buffer in that area and what it leads to, I don't really know. But I think what we can say is the supply has got to be very strong coming through. We've seen so many eruptions, the 8 of Kīlauea and the one in Mauna Loa as well, that the hotspot also feeds, right? All of those being part of the logic here.
I remember, I think it was after Mauna Loa, or one of the episodes right afterwards, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, I'm not sure what the supply rate is, but it's high. Like it,
right?
Right.
It was high before 2018 because it actually led to the lava lake from 2008 onwards, right? So really back to 2008, lava in Kīlauea, where you sustained the summit lava lake and the pool eruption for 10 years before the whole thing just got too full and burst at the seams, ripped down the East Rift Zone. And here we are after all the history we've talked about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it for me in terms of questions. Lou, you got anything? Lou's muted. There you go. Oh.
Nope. You're all good. I was just going through that, making sure nobody else asked anything. There's a lot of questions, Phil. There's a lot of questions.
Well, great. You guys are able to answer all of them then. And yeah, I can retire now.
All right. Well, yeah. 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, our normal time that we do our live streams, unless something crazy happens. You know, these episodes haven't been the thing. They've been awesome, spectacular, and all that, but we're more about disaster education and dealing with the volcanoes in that capacity. These are cool, you know, but we're looking forward to do something out of the ordinary, like a rift zone eruption, something, you know, big earthquake, something like that. Otherwise, same time, 5 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, right here. Catch you next week. Maybe we'll have our episode by then.
Yeah, maybe not, right? 5 to 7 days is a little iffy at that point. But yeah, as you say, these are all great education opportunities for us to talk about the process and what happens and like help people understand what kind of stuff lava is, the scale of what can happen, the size of the forces. And very thankfully, this is all happening in the crater. We don't have to think about anyone's house being anywhere in this field of view right here, because then that's a whole other thing. So that's what we're really trying to get everyone ready for. We'll build our little army of online informants here that can help everyone understand what's going on and what the hazards are, so that something does eventually return to our communities, that we will have more awareness and better preparation, better response, and reduce impact and recovery. That's what we're all about here.
And the link to our survey is pinned in the top of our chat. So before you step out of here, go ahead and click on that. And if you're local, please take just a few minutes and help us with that information.
And if you'd like to know a little bit more, we use that data to help us apply for grants. And the grants are what funds us and helps us keep going. So that really leads to, it's super, super important. And with that information to prove that we're having an impact, it's a much harder sell. We really appreciate all you guys.
Yep.
All right. Until next week, then, from our nonprofit Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, or HVERI. I'm Philip Ong for Lou Atori and Dane DuPont. Aloha, everybody.